Okay. Hello. Welcome to ACAB True Crime. If you're watching this, I am going to be presenting today. I'm a little nervous, but that's fine. It's my first time going live by myself. Well, that's not exactly true, but it doesn't matter. So I just wanted to talk about and just kind of started to wanting to, I'm starting to want to talk about some of these cases that I think are relevant to kind of my spiel that I'm like interested in doing. So I figured I would just start today and just start by reviewing the newly filed documents in the Delphi case, and then possibly, depending on like how things go, present some information that I have that I think might be relevant to the case, and like some connections that I see between the Delphi case and then the Idaho 4 case, actually. So, so I'll start off with, let's see here. Oops, I'm trying to pull up the view. How do I do this? Oh, here we go. Let me see. Sorry. What the hell? Okay. Cool. All right. So we'll start here, and I'll just kind of review some of the stuff that I think is pretty crazy in this case, and kind of what I think. And I should also say that I come from a background where I actually worked as a psychologist in several prisons. So I feel like I probably have pretty good perspective and yeah, just a good perspective to add to the case, I guess, from kind of my experience with dealing with a lot of offenders that are in the same type of conditions as Richard Allen is in currently. So, I'll just start off here. So, like, the defense filed 136 page document. I think it's called like a Frank's motion, where basically it sounds like they were presenting information in this report that they think that the search warrant that was granted to the investigators that eventually arrested Richard Allen were actually like oh wait, I forgot what I was talking about. My bad. I'm sorry. I'm a little nervous. I just spaced. But yeah. So the information that the defense presented in this document that's 136 pages is basically accusing the prosecution and different members of like different detectives that were involved in investigating the Delphi murders. They basically yeah, like said that they withheld information that basically was exculpatory for Richard Allen, but they chose to not pursue those leads. So yeah, it's just kind of interesting because I totally believe it, and I feel like police are super usually kind of just anyone that's in positions like these that have this much power um is bad. And like, and then once you get into the prison systems and like, you know, even myself seeing and interacting with a lot of staff at the correctional facilities that I worked at, like, to me the staff were the bigger problems than the offenders, to be honest. And they actually scared me away. Like, I ended up leaving the profession, honestly, like being a criminal psychologist, which I've like always wanted to be because of like how shitty I was treated at the Department of Corrections in Minnesota, where I'm from. So yeah, I can definitely believe some of these things that they're proposing in this document. So basically, they are just talking about, they have a glossary. Well, some of this stuff we don't have, which is kind of lame, but it does give kind of the it does a breakdown of like basically what's interesting about this document to me too. That was extra interesting to me was the discussion of the crime scene, which we didn't know details about. And then also, I thought it was interesting to find out that there was like, um, what was the other? Oh, I guess when I was reading about the correctional officers and what they were doing and like how they were dealing with Richard Allen within the correctional facility, it totally just, yeah, was not um, super shady, in my opinion. Um, so that was the table of contents. So just I'm not gonna like get into this, but I'm just gonna read over the highlights. So the defense says there's 8 things to know, and that they're claiming that there's overwhelming evidence in this case that supports these 8 statements that they're going to make. So the first one is that members of a pagan Norse religion called Odinism hijacked by white nationalists ritualistically sacrificed Abigail Williams and Liberty German. And that just like in itself is such like a crazy statement to make. And pretty crazy to think about. So they do go into it like later on in this document and they describe like what Odinism is. Um, and it's pretty interesting to me because I kind of went down this like crazy rabbit hole um, earlier this year after the Idaho 4 case started coming out. And I spent like a couple of like sleepless nights just like really going down some pretty crazy just connections, and I kept kind of following these kind of weird I kept getting kind of like a weird vibe. I'd be like, okay, that seems to be connected to that, and then that's like like coincidental, like really coincidental, like that would happen that way when this is there or whatever. It just seemed like there were so many clues that were like suggesting to me that the Idaho 4 involved law enforcement that had gone bad, and that involved like ritualistic secret society, like Greek mythology and belief systems. And so it's just super crazy to me to all of a sudden read this, and also, that was just my own personal research on the Idaho 4 case that's finding these connections. But then my personal experience, having worked as a correctional psychologist or clinical psychologist in a correctional facility, like definitely backs up. I don't know. I just feel like I have a lot to add to this case. So hopefully, yeah, others agree. So, anyways, okay. So basically, what they say in this part is that there was like this. Okay. So the crime happened on like February 14th or something like that, like on or maybe the 13th or something on 2017. And within a month, this is what the defense is claiming, that within a month, they are claiming that they the detectives had dropped the angle that this could have been a ritualistic killing. So that was kind of crazy. That they were saying it was crazy because there was so much evidence at the crime scene that suggested that this had ties to ritualistic sacrificial killings, that they actually also had like evidence that connected particular people that they knew to be involved in this like particular group of people or gang or cult or whatever secret society. But they said that after a month that the one of state trooper Jerry Holman, so Holman is cited like a lot in this document. So it says they apparently, the investigators, I guess Jerry Holman, or they'll get more into it later on in the document, but they say that they talked to some Purdue professor, and the Purdue professor for sure that the professor was like an expert in like pagan Nordic type worship. And then they said that he looked at a little bit of the evidence from the case that they presented to him, and he determined that there was actually no way, or there was not any connection to the crime scene and like what happened in the crime to these like sacrificial rituals in paganism or Odinism. But the defense is being like, what? Okay, hold on. I just read a comment. Okay, so Chuck says, why was detective, was he murdered? I did not know that. I was like, when did they, is that the guy that they say like later, they say late bloody blah, like someone that was like the good guys or whatever. Um, yeah, I don't know why, if this, if that detective Ferenczi was murdered, but I would assume if he's involved with this case and if he was like being a whistleblower, that it could be like a possibility that he was murdered to make sure that he didn't keep talking. So, but I definitely am interested to hear more about that. So, Chuck, if you have any more information about that, please feel free to share. Um, and also like the stream or something too, because maybe that'll get more people to come on here if you're if you so if you feel inclined. Anyway, so I'll keep moving on because Chuck's not saying something back, but all right, so basically they say, well, now they say that, okay, so what they claim was the deciding factor to stop looking into the Odinism lead was the fact that they talked to this professor. But now in 2023, they can uh, not present any evidence or documentation about this contact with this Purdue professor, like any emails and like they haven't been able to like actually find the information. Um, so it almost sounds like they were like, this is, to me, it sounds like the defense is kind of like, oh, this is bullshit. So, okay. And then they say that, yeah, so they keep saying bloody, 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 blah. However, wait, yeah. Based in large part upon this mystery Purdue professor's opinion, the Delphi investigative leadership claimed that it essentially abandoned considering Odinite involvement in the murders, and that and then the lawyers go, or the defense goes, and then the years passed, 2018, dot 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 dot, 2019, dot 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 dot. It's like a little dramatic to me. Like it reminds me of those. That's okay. Like the vampire. Oh my God, this is weird because I also, well, whatever, this isn't connected, but I do feel like I found some parallels to like vampirism, like with the my research into the um Idaho 4 case. But I was just thinking about the really cheesy book Twilight. And when she's like super melodramatic and she's like missing Edward or whatever, like the chapters just say like like September, dot, dot, dot. And then the next one's like October. Like, it's just like she has nothing to say, or there's like nothing happened. Her life is just empty and like whatever. But it kind of reminds me of the dramaticness of this that the lawyers presented being like, and then the years passed. But, anyways, um, then they think that the law enforcement officers, so there's these three guys that Greg Ferenczi. Okay. So that's exactly who Chuck just brought up. So it sounds like Greg Ferenczi could have possibly been murdered, which is super shady if that's the case. Because, yeah, he's one of three officers that decided to go against the, stream, I guess, and actually try to speak out on how, like, obviously something shady is going on. So, it's just pretty crazy to me to think about, like, all the people that yeah, like that would potentially be involved in this cover up and like why. And it's the same thing with the Idaho 4 case too. And there's like another connection too that I found between this case and the Idaho 4 case in terms of what was it? It was well, whatever. I like wrote a little note to myself on this document and highlighted it. So I'll for sure touch on it when it gets there, but I can't now that it's gonna bother me that I can't think of it. Um, any hoozles. So moving on. Um, so it says because of these law enforcement officers, curiosity investigative efforts, the evidence established the names of the likely murdering members of this Odinite cult became known to the Delphi investigative leadership no later than February 2018. Due to either incompetence or concerted intentionality, those in charge of the investigation refused to arrest or even properly investigate these obvious suspects, which I agree with. It's like, wow. And I kind of like the saying, like, I actually say this a lot. Because like obviously, like, you can tell from the name of my channel, ACAB True Crime, like, it's all cops are bad or all cops are bastardized or whatever. So, and I've basically become like, um, someone who's just like pretty radical in terms of like any type of like law enforcement. And it's because there's so much screwed up stuff that happens when these guys have all this power. And like to a lot of the times when I do hear about certain cases that kind of like, raise an eyebrow where you're kind of like, well, that seems pretty weird. It's like, then it's just easy for these guys to like quick push that like down under the covers and like continue doing this stuff. But it would have to be like a lot of people involved at this level. Like, but I kind of think it is like, I do feel like they're right with this whole like kind of law enforcement angle, military angle. Oh, that was the thing I was going to say is that I found it interesting that some of these guys that they're claiming like were involved with um these murders, like not Richard Allen, but the other people that they're saying actually did it. Um, a lot of them had, or one of them was like a Afghanistan um veteran and he had PTSD. And we know that there's that connection in the Idaho 4 case with that weird guy, Brent Kopacka, who ended up getting murdered by the police like a month after the murders, lived really close to Brian. And he was in the Afghanistan war with, and he was like a Marine and he had PTSD. And he was in the war with one of the officers that is one of the investigators on the Idaho 4 case. So to me, it's kind of like suggesting if you're finding some of these pretty crazy killings around, like it might possibly be that some of the correctional officers are actually in like, or not correctional officers, investigators, well, and all of them are some part of law enforcement. And so they're able to um, continue doing it and sacrificing people. And it is weird, like, because, okay, so I'll tell you something else too that's really weird to me about this Odinism thing is that, again, like with my research, I haven't done a lot of research into this Delphi case until now, but I have found it odd that, like, Delphi or whatever the name of Delphi, Indiana, is like that kind of dates back to Greek mythology. I can't remember specifically. I'll look it up, but or, well, I don't know if I should look it up right now. But anyways, like yeah, and then there was also this other weird thing about this portal. This is like gonna be way out there, so people are gonna be like, what the fuck? But there is like some supposed this is like I don't know. Some people say that there are different vortexes and energy vortexes, and that like people can kind of like almost like time travel or kind of go from one place to the other, and that one of those vortexes is in Florida, and there's one in Delphi, Indiana, I heard, um, on this totally unrelated channel that I was just geeking out on because I was like kind of interested in like I was like, what is this place? I was like a energy vortex and then they were like, yeah, Delphi, Indiana, and I was like, well, that's random and weird. Um, so anyways, okay. Anyways, what I was going off on is saying like them saying either due to incompetence or concerted intentionality. Like it is really hard sometimes like to decipher or distinguish between the difference between someone actually intentionally doing something to screw with people over, or if it's just incompetence. Like if they're just so stupid that they just actually didn't follow up on this, but like actually they had no motive to not do that. It was just they were that lazy or they're that stupid or something. And I feel like a lot of the times, like I feel like it's usually more from the incompetence angle, but I'm always like willing to give it a consideration in terms of like intentionality behind some of these uh cases that we hear with the police being involved. So, so anyways, with this case, I think it is a concerted intentionality. And I'm usually one that more is just like, usually because all these people are like, oh no, it's this and that. Like, but with this case, I'm like, I need to think about it a little bit more. So, anyways, this one says, okay, so the prosecutor in this case is this guy named Nick McClelland. So that's, I feel like, notable. And okay, so Todd Click, now retired. Okay, so Rushville assistant police now retired. So he like he's one of the whistleblowers. So he retired. That does not surprise me either, considering I bet they probably bullied him out. Honestly, yeah, interesting. Okay, so it says that after reading Richard Allen's probable cause affidavit, Click became concerned that the information contained in Richard Allen's affidavit pointing the finger at that the information contained in Richard Allen's affidavit pointing the finger at Richard Allen was far less compelling than the totality of the information that Detective Murphy, and Officer Click had accumulated during the Rushville portion of the investigation. So Click, the guy that's now retired, he like wait. Okay. Okay, so it says Click was concerned that for some reason the leadership of the investigative team had failed to share with Prosecutor McClelland that the evidence gathered by Click, Frenzy, and Murphy. So Click was like, "Oh, I see that they arrested Richard Allen, but like, what about all of these other angles that we were investigating too?" And he was like, "Oh, maybe they didn't give that information to the prosecutor because the prosecutor wouldn't have done that if he had this information that we had," was I think his thinking. And then he got a lawyer and he was concerned enough where he was like, wow, this is scary and shady enough that I need to go get a lawyer and help him write me a letter to present this information, because he could be, I mean, he might go down with the ship, you know what I mean? He's like part of this stupid team that they called like Unified Command, some stupid bullshit that they always try to like, they'll name. I don't know. I feel like the military and like cops always do that, and like they're like, they're like Operation Moonlight or whatever, and it's just like to make him feel cool, but it like really doesn't mean anything. But anyways, yeah, so then Click sent out, like, got a lawyer, he drafted this letter, and then he sent it in by certified mail. So he made sure that the prosecutor McClelland like ended up signing over it that he had this letter that Click presented to him with information connecting these Odinites that they had found, which they're going to get into later. I will explain it as I get into them later in the document. Yeah, just the fact that he had that information, he wanted to make sure that the prosecutor got it because he thought that maybe some of the other detectives were being shady, but then he didn't. So, and then it said this letter was not provided to the defense until after it was obvious from the last round of depositions that the defense would certainly be talking with Todd Click. So basically, the prosecution didn't hand over this letter that one of the investigators sent by certified mail to the prosecutor saying there's this huge other angle that is not even addressed at all in this affidavit for Richard Allen. And then, so that's like a bunch of other evidence that doesn't involve Richard Allen. So it potentially could be like exculpatory evidence, which is like the defense by like legally has to, give that over to someone, or to the defense. And the prosecution didn't. They didn't turn over that letter. So, and well, they finally did, but it wasn't until they found out that the defense was onto them, because they just like apparently dumped like a bunch of information on them, and then just kind of hoped that maybe they wouldn't dig into it enough to undercover some of these weird connections, and kind of, crazy uh, coincidences that obviously like covered stuff up. So, yeah, and then it says McClellan had this letter in his possession for over 4 months before turning it over to the defense. So Click, after Richard Allen was arrested, sent this letter by lawyer to the prosecutor in May. And then he had it for 4 months before he finally gave it to the defense, which he already knew that the defense was working with him. So, I mean, he should have handed it over to them immediately. It says there is no mistaking that this letter is exculpatory in nature and could have been used for the defense by the defense as it prepared for upcoming depositions. However, it is apparent that the prosecutor only offered it when the defense would be soon learning about it after they talked to Click, the guy who sent it. So blah 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 blah. And like, I'm not gonna try to be too nitpicky about some of these people, but I do feel like the way, I guess I mentioned that earlier, but like this document is definitely like written. It's a little bit dramatic, but I mean, you can tell it's written by lawyers and not like research scientists or whatever. And sometimes they like kind of go off on details that just like aren't super relevant to their argument. I mean, I can understand why it was like an annoyance to them or whatever and why they're mentioning it, but it's also like, it doesn't really need to be included in this document, but whatever. So basically, blah, blah, blah. Could this exculpatory evidence have been completely overlooked? Not plausible. Not only did the prosecution withhold that letter from the defense, but law enforcement also withheld several other exculpatory pieces of evidence, including an 85-page compilation of reports by Click prepared in 2019 and several videos containing statements that support the defense theory of Richard Allen's innocence. The 85-page report detailed the investigative work provided or performed by Click, Forensi, who apparently was murdered, Murphy, and others, including the FBI. So that's also pretty crazy. Yeah, so, and according to the summary of Click's investigation that he attached with his letter, the FBI determined that the individuals responsible for the homicides were involved in Nordic beliefs. So the behavioral analysis unit from the FBI, which, they do seem to be pretty good at what they do, but also ACAB. So I'm kind of like, if you weren't doing it for the FBI, maybe I'd like be more apt to listen to you. But anyways, I do want in on those secrets that the FBI has. Like, how did some of the stuff is like almost like magic. I'm like, how did you figure out that guy had a lisp from just looking at these couple of crime scenes or whatever? It's pretty crazy. But so anyways, this was news to the defense. So as no member of the unified command in charge of the investigation revealed this information to the defense during recent depositions. This includes Trooper Holman, who told the defense that he didn't remember if the FBI's BAU unit determined one way or the other whether those with Nordic beliefs had been involved in these murders. But then this document goes on to show, like, actually, fucking Trooper Holman definitely did know that and knew the extent that, I mean, he maybe didn't definitely know about the FBI's BAU unit determining this, but he definitely knew that there was strong Odinite ties to this. So anyways, prosecution didn't know of the findings of the FBI. Oh, so also they're saying, oh, that's kind of important. They also are saying that the defense has not, or that the prosecution has not provided the defense with any of the BAU, the FBI's behavioral analysis unit, like their reports determining what they think the crime or like the offender, like characteristics of the offender. but obviously it was done because they're like citing it. So that definitely should have been handed over to the defense. So yeah, basically it just says that blah blah blah. It says so basically that they got this huge evidence dump on September 8th and they're still reviewing it. Oh, and here, I mean, I shouldn't laugh, but it says while the prosecution has been holding on to this exculpatory evidence, Richard Allen has been living in hell. But to be honest, anyone that's in prison is definitely living in hell. But it does sound that like Richard Allen's living like a special kind of hell right now. But we'll get into that later on in the document. So lastly, they say that the prosecutor McClelland and that this trooper Holman asked to talk to Click, the guy who had sent the certified letter to the prosecutor, and they the defense team. What? Oh, okay. So this is just a lot of, they're like, blah, 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 and then said, okay, so wanting to allay his fears that an innocent man was sitting in Westville, Click agreed to attend the meeting with Holman, hoping that he would be learning that evidence did in fact exist, linking Richard Allen to the murders. Click's hopes were dashed. So basically, Click met with Holman and this McClelland or whatever, hoping that they would be like, hey, I know why you're like worried, but actually we did some stuff and it's not, you don't need to be worried because of A, B, and C. So for sure, this is why he's involved. And this is how we determined that the Odinites weren't involved. But they didn't do that, apparently. Apparently, upon directing the letter to McClelland, I heard nothing from the prosecutor's office or any until I received phone calls on August. Okay. He basically says, I believe the interview was an attempt for them to clean up their loose ends. So Click believed that they basically were getting together with him, not to like talk about Richard Allen and why he was responsible, but basically that they just wanted to, well, I don't know what he means by an attempt by them to clean up their loose ends. Like, what actually happened in that meeting? Did they like, you know, threaten him or something? Like, did they get information from him that could help them in like further covering stuff up? Like, I don't know. So, all right. So then next there is this guy, the Carroll County Sheriff, Tony. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Legit. I'm going to say legit to quit. But okay, this stupid unified command. Okay, so legit is super shady in all of this. He basically concealed damaging witness statements that devastate legit's timeline. A timeline legit needed to be true in order to place Richard Allen at the trail when Abby and Libby were abducted. So basically he's saying that legit, this county sheriff, Tony Legit, purposely did not include evidence, and also they alleged that he actually like misrepresented or specifically lied about evidence in order to get the search warrant into Richard Allen's house, like basically accusing them of saying that it was all a setup to just like basically Richard Allen's their patsy, their fall guy. So anyways, yeah, they say Richard Allen has also zero connections to any pagan cult or pagan cultists. And furthermore, no forensic evidence such as DNA or electronic evidence links Richard Allen to the girls or to the crime scene, i.e. he's a completely innocent man, which that's like a stretch. I understand that they're his defense lawyer, but that's not, I don't think we can really like, deduce that from this. Like, I mean, it seems like he was on the bridge that day. He seems to be like, I don't know, like around the area that these other guys are. He's like around the same age, race. I mean, I don't know him, so he could just be a fall guy, but also he could be involved. And I kind of feel the same way about Brian Kohlberger too. Like, everyone's like, so like, they're like, oh, I just won't hear anything else because obviously he was involved. It had to be him. But it's like, dude, there can be more than one person involved here. It can be a group. Like it can be like a concerted, like collective effort to cover this stuff up, like a real conspiracy. So yeah, like yeah, it's just interesting to think about. I do wonder. I mean, I think both if Brian Kohlberger and if Richard Allen are involved in these crimes, I don't think that they were the only ones that did it. You know what I mean? I think if they were involved, they were just like kind of minimal, like just like kind of wannabes or something. I don't want to make assumptions, but kind of people that are just like tag-alongs that they're like, okay, yeah, I just want to do things to be cool, and then like they actually get themselves involved in something like really crazy, and then the people that are having them do these things, they're like kind of extorting them or like using them so they don't get blood on their hands type of deal sometimes, like putting them up to be the patsy. Anyways, it says evidence backing these assertions was found scattered over no less than 10 hard drives and several flash drives. Basically, they got all this information September 8th. They're pissed. So then they also say members Odinism of the same pagan cult are employed as correctional officers in the Indiana Department of Corrections at Westville Correctional Facility, a maximum security unit of this dilapidated reformatory that Richard Allen is being threatened, intimidated, and mentally abused. And I believe that. I totally believe that. And like I said, I worked at the Minnesota Department of Corrections as a correctional clinical psychologist. I actually worked at 3 different ones. So I worked at the maximum security one that we have, and then I also worked at 2 moderate to like high level security prisons, and then at another one that was like more like minimum to moderate. So that just the only difference between those are basically how they do controlled movements and like how much of a ratio there is from staff to offenders and stuff. And also like the type of people that get sent there. Like obviously people that are in the higher level security prisons are more likely to have been involved with like person on person crimes or violent crimes or so they can be like a little bit scarier for other offenders in those if they're not affiliated with the right gang. And a lot of people do join gangs in prison, like just for the protection. Like you kind of have to join up with someone in order to like not just always be the guy that they're, stealing lunch money from and, beating up or whatever. So, and I, again, have no doubt that there are definitely people that are Odinists that are correctional officers. I don't mean to say whatever, but like I said, when I was working at prison, it was definitely, I was more scared off from the prison atmosphere due to the prison guards, not the prison guards specifically, but yes, the prison guards, but all of the correctional staff versus the offenders. Like I liked the offenders more than I liked the correctional staff. So I have no doubt that there are definitely people, because it's also hard to find people to be correctional officers too. You don't need to have any type of education. So it is, and like a lot of time it is ex-military dudes. I feel like almost all of the people that were correctional officers, and especially the ones that were in higher level positions at the like correctional facilities, were people who had a military background. So I don't know why I'm saying that. Like, I don't know why I think that might be relevant, but I do feel like that type of mentality goes kind of hand in hand. Anyway, so this document references Unified Command. Okay, this is a stupid thing. So I guess the Unified Command was the leadership of the Delphi murder investigation, and according to Tony Legit, it consisted of law enforcement officers of a variety of entities from local, state, and federal, who were overseers of the entire investigative operation. So from Carroll County, they have Tony Legit and Kevin Hammond. From the state police, they have someone named Dave Vito, someone named Jay Harper, and then this guy, Jerry Holman. And then from the FBI, they say they have Rich Davies. So this is apparently the people that are part of this special group called the Unified Command. And, they have different levels. That's the other thing that from what I found out from working at the prisons is like, it's just surprising to me like how little of like overlap and sharing there is like between different levels of agencies. Like, I mean, I you would think that people would know one way or another, like, if okay, so like for example, okay, I'm from Minneapolis. And actually, I was working at Lino Lakes Correctional Facility, um, which was about 30 miles or 30 minutes outside of Minneapolis when George Floyd was murdered. And actually, Dave Chauvin, is that his name? Uh, Whatever, Chauvin was sent to a prison that I also worked at. And yeah, it was pretty crazy. Um, and the atmosphere, like within the prisons at that time when George Floyd stuff was going down, was like pretty crazy. Um, but I was surprised because what happened in Minneapolis, like literally the city burnt down. Like it was crazy. I also live or was living at the time, like very close to where George Floyd was murdered. So like, I am a single female and I live in a apartment that is at garden level, and like I feel like I'm sharing too much information right now, but yeah, like I was definitely freaked out. There was like I could hear black hot choppers going on all night. Like the liquor store across the street from me was like being burned down. Like there was no police anywhere to be found. That was the night that like the police station burnt down. And like literally there was like this huge uprising. And so then they didn't show up, like no type of enforcement showed up for like a couple of days. Like they literally let the city burn down for like 2 days. It was fucking insane, honestly. But then when they did, it was like the reason why it took them so long to actually like come into the city was because they needed to like connect between all these different levels. It was just like, okay, well, we didn't have enough Minneapolis city police officers, so we had to wait for the state troopers to come in and help. But then it's like, the state troopers like come in and help, but then they're not part of the same city, and then also like other police officer cities, and then also our National Guard. Like, do we need that National Guard to come in? No one communicates like anyone with anyone. Like you can't just like have one. It just seems really weird to me. Like, and I feel like we figured this shit out like back in during 9/11 too. Like when the Twin Towers went down, it was like, people were like calling the military, like we need the military here, but it was like the military was just like, there's all with the bureaucracy, it's like all these different levels that you have to go through in order to get shit it's like people just can't show up there and then when that's absolutely what you need. So I just feel like we've had over 20 years now to like be able to kind of get our shit together around that, and still it seems to not be done. And I feel the same way about the Maui wildfires too, and just the way that kind of things were able to slip between the local enforcement officers, and then the like FEMA coming in, and then like whether or not like the fire people are gonna, it was just like very kind of, I don't know, choppy. And I just feel like that's just something else that I think we need to do better at in terms of like emergency responses. But yes, so back to Odinism. Odinism is the pagan religion referenced above, and Odinites are enamored with Viking Nordic culture. And they say that evidence supports that at the crime scenes, these murdering Odinites left behind obvious signatures, symbols in the form of runes. And these runes were formed with sticks, fashioned with tree branches, and painted using the blood of Liberty German. So, and like runes are, I'm sure you guys all probably know what runes are, but I actually have some. But yeah, it is like ancient Celtic stuff, or like Nordic people use them, and they're a way to they're actually like considered to be like kind of like tarot cards. Like they're like an avenue into the spiritual world. Um so and one of them they claim is Odin, but I don't really know the background of that. But in my research with the Idaho 4 case and some of the connections that I ended up finding, I came back to some Loki shit. I feel like Loki was involved with the Idaho 4 stuff, or like someone had some like affinity for Loki. And Loki is Odin's son. So I just feel like there's like these different connections that are kind of just weird that I picked up on it back in January. And I was thinking too, like I took all these screenshots too, and it's just so confusing. But I was thinking I could show them. Like this one I'm looking at on my phone. It says it's January 10th. I took the screenshot and it's talking about nihilism. And because also I feel like nihilism in Friedrich Nietzsche is also associated with some of these same belief systems. So, and Nazi stuff like Hitler really had a lot of, he used nihilism and a lot of Friedrich Nietzsche's, like, because Friedrich Nietzsche geeked out on nihilism and he basically had these theories that it was like, he came up with this idea, like, he created this thing called the Ubermensch, and basically like the ultimate man, like, and he believed that in order to be this ultimate person you had to like face both, and you had like there was like the plurality, kind of like Odin's two sons, like Loki and whatever his brother's name, Thor. And then yeah, just a lot of light and dark and like balance, yin and yang energy. Like I see, like I just, anyways, I can definitely go down like so many, there's so like there's all these paradoxes, and um like Dionysus is another thing that came up a lot in my research with Idaho 4. And I don't know if you guys know about Dionysus, but he is also kind of similarly like associated with ancient like pagan type festivals. And Dionysus is kind of like um the energy, like all of the different rituals that they would do for Dionysus were basically like festivals of like euphoria. So they would like drink a bunch of wine. Like Dionysus was the god of wine, and then I think like of sex too. So like basically everyone would just get drunk and then they'd have sex all weekend or whatever they did. They danced around like euphoria dancing and stuff, and then had a bunch of fun, and like, but then they like tried to keep it like under wraps from the big ups like in the world, because they were like, we don't want them knowing that we're having fun, because it was like, well, I don't know, that sounds stupid, but I think it kind of was similar to that, like where it was like kind of the lay people, like of the land, like participated in some of these more like, yeah, ritualistic type festivals and um spells, ritual stuff. So anyways, that's stuff that I found in my own research with Idaho 4. And I don't know really when would be a good time to like go over all that information, like if I should do it now or but yeah, anyways, so yeah, so Diana, okay, so he is the excess of truth and the god of all boundary dissolution between human beings and between human and nature. um Life and death are definitely integrated into a unity, indestructible life. In Dionysiac festivals, the paradoxical union of life and death, dominated by life, is realized. So that's like kind of weird to me. Um, he's a pragmatic God responsible for saving the soul after death, the God of religious eschatology and of our true nature under the civilized veneer, what Freud would call thanatos, or the death drive, opposed to the ordering of eros in civil society. So basically it's like talking about like, the nihilist, like um is kind of like an anarchist, but like I think what Friedrich Nietzsche was trying to say is that like you have to have a balance, like you have to confront your dark sides and like see your shadow self, like in order to become the ultimate man and like kind of rise one step above what we currently are. We need to like be able to like honor that side of ourselves, like the innate drive to kill, or like these really kind of like ritualistic things, like murdering people and trying to like give them up to the gods. Or so I don't know, I'm not doing a great job explaining it, but I do feel like, I know it seems like a little bit of a stretch, but um I do think that I definitely found some weird associations with that. So anyways, back to the Odinism and Odinites and runes. By the way, for everyone that's still here, it looks like there's 2 people here, and I appreciate all of you for being here. Thank you so much. This is like my first time doing this, so I am definitely pretty nervous, and it's like makes me feel better that I'm not here alone. So, it says that sticks and tree branches were deliberately, carefully, and proficiently placed on each girl in a certain arrangement, mimicking certain runes. And it looks like one of the branches appeared to have been cut off cleanly by some type of tool, like an electric saw. And also, the blood of Liberty German was used as the paint to mark a tree with a rune that looks similar to the letter F. And the rune that is the letter F is it's they said it means Odin. And then there's another symbol that is like hail. So it's like hail Odin that was like written at the crime scene, they say. So it's a calling card of this religious cult. They said you could quickly Google this and see that it was a calling card of this pagan religious cult, but they abandoned the obvious correlation between the crime scene and Odinism, despite the obscene amount of evidence linking Odinism to the crime scene. So, oh, this is weird. Yeah, this is what I highlighted this too. It says, although State Police Superintendent Doug Carter pulled the plug and kicked the FBI off the Delphi murder case around 2021 over some conflicts. Oh, okay. I don't know why they say although, but anyways, so yeah, Doug Carter, some state police superintendent dude, apparently fired the FBI. He was working on the case. That's weird. Like, why? I mean, again, like these different entities of government don't know each other, so it's kind of nice in a way when you're doing these investigations or whatever to have people that can like that aren't all just part of one agency that can just be corrupt. Like it kind of gives people a chance to like do a checks and balance, you know? But it's just weird. But ultimately, they do end up saying, but this is under jurisdiction. They're just allowing us to be here to help. But if they didn't want us to be there, they wouldn't be there. It's like still up to like the county or whatever the murder was. Like, I mean, it only goes to the FBI, like, you know, if it's considered a federal murder case, which is like if you take the body across lines or like whatever. So, oh shit. Sorry. So yeah, and then yeah, that seems weird, but so yeah, Jerry Holman said that this guy was fired, but then I guess legit, the guy too legit to quit, he claimed under oath that Doug Carter was not involved in making the decisions for the case, which is kind of weird. So blah blah blah. Basically, they're just saying that like, you know, there's all this evidence. They didn't, you know, look into it. Why not? And then they said nothing links Richard Allen to Odinism or any religious cult, which I think that is like significant to note. Like, you know, if they did find all this weird stuff, then it's like, you know, linked to Odinism. How do you explain that away? But then I was also thinking, you know, it might be a good way for people to like kind of like get people to pay attention to one angle so then they don't look at another angle, you know? Like I know Charles Manson did that when they did their Helter Skelter murders, and like they ended up writing on the walls in blood, which is also similar to this, kind of in a way. They wrote like I think like something about pigs or like fuck 12 or something like that, something anti-establishment, anti-police. And there was something else too that they wanted it to seem like the people who were doing the murders were like black people. I think they tried to pin it on like on black people. So because they like were super, like Charles Manson was like super racist, I think. So anyways, it says also no forensics such as DNA, no electronic data extracted from his computers or phones from his social media links Richard Allen to the crime scene. Nothing links Richard Allen to any of the Odinite suspects. The same Odinite suspects that evidence strongly supports sacrificed Abby and Libby in some sort of pagan ritual. It says Richard Allen has nothing to do with this crime, but rather is an innocent man. a patsy for the police, arrested 20 days before an election, which that is pretty shady. And like the election, he was arrested by the sheriff who was running for re-election for sheriff. So that is kind of shady. And it also is just super convenient. You know, it's like, oh, I know I want to cover up this crime. I know that I like need to get some things like set up so I can pin it on this guy, but I'm gonna like do the timing. So then when I arrest him, it'll be like right before I get elected. You know, it's like actually pretty good. Planning ahead if that was the case from him. So yeah, and then it says, yeah. Now they start talking about these other guys. So Brad Holder. So this is pretty crazy. It is okay. So Brad Holder is this dude whose son dated Abby, one of the victims. And this Brad Holder guy, he also posted, so he's the dad of one of Abby's boyfriends. And then Brad also posted pictures on his Facebook that was symbols that were the same symbols as the crime scene. So this is information that was like not released as public information. So people should not have known that these symbols were used at the murders. But this guy, 30 days after the murders, is posting these same type of symbols and also like other similar setups that like that look like the scene of the murder. So like for example, they said that they found like a video of like some guy writing a symbol on a tree, and they found a symbol on a tree written in Libby's blood. So they were saying like, oh, we have evidence of these guys doing these similar type rituals as what was done at the crime scene. And this guy that is posting these pictures, he has a son who dated Abby. So that seems, yeah, like something that probably definitely should have been followed up on. It says, so then they go, the defense believes that the court will be shocked at the number of clues or Easter eggs, both before and after the murders, that Holder openly posted on his Facebook page that pointed the finger to his involvement in the murders. So, I mean, that is pretty like, I found a lot of that shit too with my Idaho 4 research. Like, I really do want to get into this stuff. I should just like maybe just go live one day for like 8 hours and just like unpack like all of the shit that because I'm trying to organize it, but it's so much information that it's just like really hard to figure out. Like, because I'm seeing like all these different themes, and I'm just like, how do I explain this? But then it's like, when I saw this come out and then they started, the defense is making these claims, I'm just like, holy shit, this is like the same shit I was finding in Idaho 4. Like, that's crazy. Like, that validates me, my beliefs, and like my research a little bit more, definitely. I think like it makes me seem like not it's just crazy that I would have found similar shit that these guys found. And like, I had no idea that they were, that there was like, they were finding this stuff. So anyways, but it says, yeah, oh, the Easter eggs. So it is creepy, like these Easter eggs that were left at the scene. And I'm so excited to hear the evidence at the Idaho 4 case, because I can guarantee you that there is some crazy ritualistic shit that was there. I'm pretty sure that I saw crime scene photos of blood on the wall, like stuff written on the wall in blood. I don't know if anyone else remembers seeing that, or if they like have access to any of those pictures like in the early days. Like, I'm pretty sure that picture isn't really circulating anymore, but I do remember being like, there was like one of the pictures from the house and you could like see into the, I think maybe hallway or one of the bedrooms or something. And it was like an investigator in there, and then it showed a wall. She was like it was like a woman, and she was like by a wall, and then it looked like there was like blood on the wall, but I couldn't like really make out what it said. So, that's also similar to this type of, this stuff. So, but yeah, again, the Easter eggs and like these little like clues that seem to be dropped, or like, yeah, it's just so weird. It's like seems to be so particularly like set up and like planned out down to like minute details, like certain shout outs to like certain, killers or beliefs, or it's just weird. So I don't know. Anyways, I don't know if they are connected, but it just does seem weird. So anyways, they say it is mind-blowing that Brad Holder was never even considered a suspect in the murders of Abby and Libby, which that does seem weird to me. His son dated one of the girls that was murdered, and he is posting shit 30 days later with the same symbology on his Facebook as what was found at the scene. Like, that's pretty insane. So yeah, and then it says basically confirming that they never considered Brad Holder. And then in a report, it says that Tony Legit basically said that there was no leads required for this Brad Holder guy. So to me, it suggests that Tony Legit and Brad Holder might be associated for some reason. So yeah, he says Legit made that determination a mere 15 days after the girls were murdered. By March 16th, 2023, Unified Command member Kevin Hammond wrote that Brad Holder has been cleared. So here's another one. Like, Kevin Hammond wrote Brad Holder has been cleared. So, like, I want to know if there's like, any associations with Kevin Hammond and Brad Holder. Like, how big are these towns? Like, I mean, do they all know each other? Like, are these guys friends? Like, I don't know. So, yeah. Unified, blah, 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 blah. Mimicked ruins found at the crime scene. So same shit that they're saying. Like, how could they not consider him a suspect? Yeah, and it says that there was pictures, which I kind of explained just like earlier, that actually mimic the crime scene, so they'll get into it. Okay, so then they say in April 2017, Trooper Joseph Ryan Winters, he receives a phone call from a man in Georgia named Ryan Boucher, who has discovered disturbing images in Brad Holder's social media account. So I kind of want to know who this like Ryan Boucher is. Like, was he just doing his own research? Like, was he affiliated with these Odinites, and like he was starting to have like, you know, a lapse in conscious, like, or like he was starting to get a conscious. I don't know. So that just seemed kind of weird, but yeah. Oh, I guess it does say so. Having somehow learned that Brad Holder's son had dated Abby Williams, Mr. Boucher began reviewing Brad Holder's social media history. One of the images Boucher reviewed or viewed on Brad Holder's social media account was an image of two women either dead or posed as if they were dead on the ground in what appeared to be a forest. Both women had tree limbs and sticks arranged on their bodies, which is exactly how they found these girls. One of the images Bush reviewed on, I already said that. Both women had tree limbs. I already said that. One of the women who had her arm stretched out above her head, similar to the way that Libby's arm was stretched above her head. Both women were clothed, and the stick and tree branch formations on these girls was different than the stick and tree branch formations on Abby and Libby, but otherwise, it bore a very eerie similarity to the murder scene in Delphi. So I wonder that too is like, like I wonder what symbols were actually on Brad Holder's account, and if that was like maybe like they have different sects like of this cult. Like maybe there's Odinites like all over the world, and there's like the Georgia sect, and then there's the Delphi sect, and then there's the like Idaho Moscow sect. And the other thing that I think is really weird about some of these things too is like, why do all these murders happen around places that are like named for different countries? Like, there was Moscow, Idaho. When I first heard about the Moscow murders, I was like, I actually thought it was in Moscow. I was like, Dad, did you hear about like the 4 kids that were murdered in Moscow and like Russia? And it was like, kind of, just 6 months after the Ukraine shit happened. And I was looking into it. I was like, oh, never mind. Because I was like, why are they even there in the first place? And then I was like, oh, wait, never mind. This is like in Idaho. And then like with this other case, there's the Delphi, which is like, I'm pretty sure Delphi was like an old city in like Greece or something. And then there was Peru, Indiana too. So anyways, could be a coincidence, but I thought it was interesting. But yeah, and also interesting that maybe the different sects have like used different rune symbols, because I think there's like 23 different rune symbols. I have a set because I'm like kind of into like mysticism, like metaphysical stuff. But so it says Ryan Boucher had no knowledge of the actual crime scene. But he was disturbed that the images, that image and other images, and like he was disturbed by the same images that showed this Brad Holder's like fascination with these rune symbols or whatever. So okay, then they say that Mr. Boucher contacted Tobe Lesenby, who at the time was the sheriff of Carroll County. So Lesenby quickly rebuffed Boucher, telling Boucher that Holder was not a suspect. Undeterred, Mr. Boucher contacted the state police where he ended up talking to Trooper Joseph Ryan Winters. So back to like up here, it says, where does it even say? Whatever, I don't know why I'm going backwards, but it's basically just saying that this Ryan guy that doesn't have any like knowledge of the crime, like got a hold of Lesenby or whatever Lesenby, and the guy told him, nope, we closed that. That's not actually a lead. And then Ryan was still kind of like, well, that seems weird. And so then he decided to like continue seeking out someone else to report it to, thinking that maybe that was shady, probably. And then ended up speaking to the state police. And then that's how he got a hold of this Winter dude. So then Winter took the report and after, okay, let's see, it says here. Okay, so after the conversation, so this is Trooper Winters. After the conversation he had with this Boucher guy who called him to be like, hey, I reported this to Lazenby and he didn't do anything about it. Then after the conversation that Winters had with this Boucher guy, he put it into a Dropbox, like a drive online or something, and then also put the images that Boucher had taken, like probably the screenshots or whatever, and put it into a Dropbox. So and then Winters discussed these findings face to face with Jerry Holman of Unified Command. So again, this Jerry Holman is like this kind of like, troublemaker or whatever. So Winters requested law enforcement to re-interview Brad Holder because of this information that he found out from Boucher about the similar images on Facebook. And defense thinks that they haven't actually followed up with Brad Holder, but they don't know because they're not like turning over any information. So, oh yeah, and it says here too, like I just said, it should be noted that the defense is still not seeing the disturbing images that Winters reported and that Boucher. Okay, then it also says Winters said that he attempted to locate the images, but he was unable to find them. So that's, kind of weird. Like, where did they go? But because of the potential importance, the defense decided to go seek out Boucher, actually travel down to Georgia. So they're like in Indiana. They went down to Georgia to meet with this dude. And then now the defense team has these images, but they wouldn't have had them had they not done that, which is pretty like crazy to think about. So yeah, it says instead the defense located these images in Georgia and then turned them over to the very people who had the obligation to provide them to the defense. Like the writing is kind of funny. I like it though. So then Unified Command, this like stupid little group that they made up, included Tony Legit, who drafted the affidavit for search warrant. And he knew about Brad Holder and about like these ruins and stuff. But he didn't tell the judge who was asking the search warrant for. So this is what the defense is saying. The defense is saying, hey, we don't think that they got that thing like appropriately, the search warrant. So they should have never been able to come into Richard Allen's house. So none of this should even be able to look at. Like he should be able to get off. So, which is interesting. Like again, I feel like fucking Richard Allen's probably involved, but I don't think that he's like the main person, but maybe he's not at all. I don't know. Anyways, so it says that the court will learn that other people confessed to the crime and that those people have connections to Brad Holder, the guy who posted the shit on his Facebook. So that's pretty weird too. So what they end up saying is a clear nexus between Brad Holder and at least 4 other suspects. And these 4 other suspects are Elvis Fields from Rushville, Patrick Westphal from Delphi, Johnny Messer from Rushville, and Rod Abrams from Rushville, now living in Cornersville. And so then this report goes into detail, like who these people are. So, and I can hopefully just give a brief overview of these guys and why it is kind of weird. But let me just grab a little sip of my Mountain Dew real quick. Hello to the 3 people here. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to like and subscribe, that would be super cool, and I would appreciate you so much. But never mind, it's 2 now. It looks like I scared someone away when I said that, but thank you to the 2 that are here still. Thank you. All right, so anyways, Elvis Field is this dude who apparently confessed to his sister that he was involved with the murders. He actually confessed to 2 of his sisters, and he explained that he was up on the bridge. So he actually told so he was living with one of his sisters. So okay, let me just start over here. So Elvis Fields, it should be known, is someone that is like developmentally delayed a little bit. So I don't know if he actually has if he's on disability or what the deal is, but it just sounds like he's just not the brightest bulb. And so AKA he's easy to exploit, extort, take advantage of, that type of stuff. So just keep that in mind also when you're hearing this story. So Elvis confessed to his sister. So he was living with his one sister at the time of the crime. And he told his sister that it was one night he was acting kind of weird. It was I think on the night of the murders or the next day or something. And the sister said he was acting weird and that he confessed to her saying that he was involved with the murders on the hybrid, or he was involved with the murder of 2 people on a bridge, and that he's going to be going away for a long time or something like that. And it was before these murders were really reported on. So when his sister eventually heard a couple days later in the news about the murders of the girls, she was like, holy shit, was that what Elvis is talking about? Which, by the way, I also love that this dude's name is Elvis. Yeah, I don't know why, but it just seems fitting. Anyways, yeah, it says that he provided intimate details of the crime scene to his sister. And okay, so he said that he had a brother now after being in that, but he doesn't have a blood brother. He now has a brother, and that he was part of a gang. So he, I guess Elvis was questioned in February 2018. So this is a year after the murder. Elvis was questioned, and he denied involvement. But then when the police officers went to drop him off, Elvis turned around and walked back to the car and asked the state trooper if Elvis's spit was found on one of the girls, but he could explain it away, would he still be in trouble? Basically, what they're alleging is, and again, remember, Elvis is low IQ. And I don't know for sure, but again, I'm a clinical psychologist and I've done a lot of intelligence testing, and definitely from and that happens a lot in people with prison. A lot of them have brain injuries and are just lower intelligence. So it's just sad because they're I consider them to be pretty kind of vulnerable in a way, even though you wouldn't necessarily think of them as being vulnerable. Anyways, so yeah, he's obviously not the brightest bunch, and he's says he has no involvement, and then he's walking away, and then he comes back to the troopers and he's like, wait, if there was spit on one of the girls' bodies and it was mine, but I could say why it was there, but I definitely didn't murder them. Would that be cool? Which is so dumb, so that's just kind of sad that he's that clueless, I guess. And it makes me think, when he was actually committing the crime, it was probably just peer pressure, so, and I think he was probably easily pressured by some of the scarier guys. So when I was working in prison again, I worked with a couple of offenders doing long-term therapy. I mostly just did diagnostic tests and interviews and referrals for different neurological stuff. I did like a lot of neurocognitive testing, again, because of the issues that I was talking about with all the brain injuries and stuff. But I forgot what I was talking about. Um, so never mind. Oh, yeah, I was gonna say what I was talking about is I did do long-term therapy with this one guy who's scary as fuck. He was probably like one of the scariest people I've like ever known or like interacted with. And he was like, you know, a white supremacist, and he had done some really messed up things to his family. And then also he had some pretty crazy stories that were like associated with, you know, kind of similar gang activity. And I think tried to be like pretend he was cooler than he actually was. You know what I mean? Like I think he was definitely someone who had like narcissistic tendencies, definitely borderline personality disorder, like but and some other stuff too, but because he had major trauma in his background. But anyways, um basically I think he was kind of a runner for this gang, similar to like Elvis might be describing. But those gangs are pretty scary. And it's like, you know, it's just really easy for very violent offenders to, again, just exploit the more vulnerable people. And even vulnerable might not, like this other dude that I was talking about that I worked with, um, you know, I don't think he didn't have a low IQ. Like I said, he definitely had personality disorders because of his trauma history and stuff. Um, but I think he was still easy to take advantage of, you know. And I guess people just in gangs in general, like the reason why you're usually joining a gang is because of like, you know, you're feeling some need to protect yourself, I think is usually why gangs are formed. So I just think that's like something also to consider about people and like just taking different considerations into why people commit crimes. You know, I have lots of theories about that I can get into on this channel as they come up. So anyways, all right. So state trooper that heard Elvis utter these words, his name was Kevin Murphy, was not part of the unified command, but oh, they didn't capitalize C. How dare they? But immediately relayed Elvis's disturbing question to Jay Harper of Unified Command. Oh, they did this time. Elvis also admitted to a different sister, so this is another one, that he had in fact spit on the girls, and then he told her that he was on a trail and a bridge with the two girls that he was killed, and that he was going away for a long time. And then his alibi, they say, is also probably flawed. It's about like a roommate, which is this guy, Rod Abrams, which this is, again, we see the name that was brought up out of those like four people that they think were a part of this crime, besides Brad Holder. I think it's five, including Brad Holder, but I might be wrong about that. It might just be four, but we'll get into the name. So anyway, so the roommate's name is Rod Abrams. This is Elvis's roommate. And then they also, so Abrams told the police when he talked to them that they were visiting a friend of theirs in Muncie, and that they visited this guy in Muncie with Ned Smith. So Ned Smith is another person that the defense is alleging was involved with these murders. So it says, unfortunately for Rod Abrams, the story conflicted with the story that Elvis Fields told law enforcement as to Elvis's whereabouts on February 13th. These shady alibis were relayed to Unified Command. These shady alibis will be further explained in the body of the memorandum. Furthermore, Unified Command knew that on February 1st, Elvis' sister passed a polygraph examination when asked if she was telling the truth about what Elvis had confessed to her. So they went as far to, you know, interview both of these sisters, and then like the sister actually like reported it to the police. They were like, hey, can you come in? So she did. She gave him an interview. Then they like went back, I think, talked about it. Then they asked like, hey, would you be willing to like take a polygraph about the information that you just told us about your brother? And she was like, yeah. And then she passed it. So I don't know, I don't really believe in polygraphs anyways, but you know, it's worthy of noting at least. So, and then there was this other guy named Patrick Westfall. Patrick Westfall, who was living in Delphi, very close to the murder scene on February 13th. And he was an Odinite. All these guys, Patrick Westphal was like definitely an Odinite. So, and these two Odinites, Patrick Westphal and Brad Holder, were close friends up until January of 2017. But then apparently it abruptly ended in February of 2017, which they found out like through kind of looking at their Facebook accounts and like them not being together, but also like through they interviewed their wives or their girlfriends of like these two and got information that these guys gave their girlfriends that talked about what they're explaining right now. So these two were friends, but then they apparently were okay, so it says in February 2017, where Holder and Westphal were in the woods near a river conducting a ritual. One of them said or did something the other did not agree with, and they no longer talk to each other. So, what could that be? So the river was near Patrick's house. So, anyways, an intoxicated Brad Holder shared this disturbing information with his ex-wife, Amber Holder. So then she relayed the information to law enforcement who weren't a part of the Unified Command in 2019. And then they relayed the information to the Unified Command. And then Too Legit to Quit didn't tell the judge about it. So that all seems pretty shady. Yeah. And then it says, so this gets into the details. According to police reports, Brad Holder told his ex-wife that Westphal and his people killed Abigail Williams and Liberty German because one of their mothers was mixing with other people outside the mother's race, because apparently this is like a white supremacist group, and that they don't like it when like white women hook up with like black men, or I don't know if it's that specific gender, but probably, or it's probably both. Who knows? And that Brad Holder told his wife, I can only protect you so much if you keep asking questions. Basically, shut up, bitch. Don't ask me any more questions. Which, honestly, if I was in that situation, I would never ask questions. I mean, it would be really interesting. I'd want to know. And definitely when I like worked as like, a psychologist in the prisons and stuff, like it was very tempting to hear of these like dramatic details and like, kind of get caught up in this, I don't know how to explain it, but the pomp and not pomp and circumstance, but basically like I feel like offenders think that they're so cool or whatever, if they can tell these like war stories in a way. I shouldn't say that they think they're so cool, but I feel like it is kind of like a claim to fame that they can tell these war stories and then they look cool like in front of people. But like, and it is easy to get wrapped up in that, like as someone who's interviewing them or even, as a girlfriend or whatever. But if I was someone that was like personally connected to these people, I would not want to hear a single thing that they were doing at all. Like, do not tell me, because I cannot keep a secret. Plus, I don't want to know that information. You know what I mean? Like, how could you keep dating someone that ritually sacrificed children? Like, that's just weird. So anyways, that well, I'll get off the soapbox there. And Brad told his wife, Amber, that Patrick Westphal had many people backing him up and that Westphal also had powerful friends. So to me, that suggests maybe something with law enforcement, right? I don't know. I think so. I think it could be for sure. And then it says Legit knew of this information for more than 3 years before Legit sought a search warrant for Richard Allen's house. Yet Legit never shared this information with Judge Diener. And it says that Westphal also had a weak alibi. And he just said that he was at home, I think, with his son, and that the defense was not able to find any like evidence that the prosecution actually followed up about that claim. Like they are assuming that they just accepted it as fact without actually looking into it. So then they also talk about this other Odinite named Johnny Messer. And so like these guys, it's the same group that they list, that they're kind of, proposing that all of these men were involved rather than Richard Allen. So This Johnny Messer apparently was the recruiter for the Oldenites, and he's the connecting factor between the dudes like Elvis and Rod. Elvis and Rod somehow knew this Jeremy Messer guy, and then Jeremy Messer knew Westfall. So that's how the dude Elvis that confessed, how they can prove that he's associated with Brad Holder, who has evidence of the crime scene on his Facebook. So that does seem pretty incriminating. So they said that law enforcement knew that Johnny Messer was friends with Brad Holder and Patrick Westfall, and that they knew that Messer was acquaintances with Elvis and Rod. So they said it was just a bizarre coincidence. Apparently, this unified command said that. Okay. Also, they say that Elvis, again, the kind of slow guy, he started repeating all of the Facebook posts that Brad Holder was posting. So he would, post a picture of like a rune symbol with like a bunch of guns or something. And then Elvis, like the next day, would publish on Facebook a picture of different runes with a bunch of other weapons, like knives or something. So it was like, and it happened like 3 or 4 times that it was like, obviously he was like mimicking because he like, he was trying to be cool. Like he was slow. He looked up to this dude and he thought it would be cool to like copy what he was doing on Facebook. So there's the other connection that Elvis like had some affinity for Brad Holder, who they think is also involved with the crime. So then it says, he claimed Jerry Holman, this guy that I said, this Holman guy keeps coming up. He's like one of the main like dudes that I think was involved, obviously, in this cover up. Like I feel like he's not just incompetence. Like he seems like someone that was like actively involved in like in carrying out like covering up the shit. So he claimed he did not even know who Johnny Messer was, nor what the evidence showed of Messer's possible role in the murders. And then the defense says it's additionally infuriating that Johnny Messer was cleared as a suspect in the murders when considering these facts. So then it says Johnny's ex-girlfriend, so this Johnny guy, he had an ex-girlfriend, Taylor, and Taylor told police that Johnny and Patrick Westfall were super tight. They were like brothers. And she said that she borrowed a car to Johnny, her boyfriend, on or around Valentine's Day in 2017, and that she reported that her boyfriend Johnny Messer drove her car to go hang out with some Odinites. Well, they call them Vinlanders, but like Vinlanders are also Odinites, or like they're kind of like, I think Odinites are Vinlanders or something, or Vinlanders are like a branch of Odinites or something. I don't know. I'll have to look into that, but it's pretty much the same. And then when they returned her car after Valentine's Day of the same year that the girls were murdered, it had dried blood all over the side of it. And that Johnny refused to talk about the details about how blood got there. And she was like, yeah, it took a long time to wash the blood out, which I'm like, oh my God. So, and then Messer lied and said he had never been to Delphi, home of his brother Patrick Westfall, or near the home of his other Odinite brother Brad Holder, which they're kind of saying like wasn't accurate. And so, okay, yeah, this is how they explain Vinlander. Vinlander is a word interchangeable with those that practice Odinism. Apparently, this state trooper Purdy stated in his depositions that all members of Vinlanders are also Odinists. Okay, so I said that right. Basically, they're a white supremacist group consisting of Odinists. Oh, okay, so I get that. All right, so Vinlanders are a special branch of Odinites that are specifically white supremacists. Oh, they sound like a fun bunch. So yeah, Brad Holder, Patrick Westfall, Johnny Messer, these dudes, 3 dudes all sound like they are kind of like, yeah, more of like the leaders in this, whereas like Rod and Elvis are like kind of more of the followers. They're probably the more hardcore dudes, but and then it says that Johnny Messer's ex-girlfriend Taylor Hornady also confirmed that all Vinlanders were all Odinists, and that Johnny Messer, Brad Holder, and Patrick Westphal were all members of Finlair. Which I also am like a little disturbed that they're releasing all of these names of these people that gave this, you know, information to the people. Like, I'm like, dude, like, I'm scared for these people. Like, that's why don't fucking talk to the police. That's what I think. Like, honestly, I don't trust the police at all. If I had any information that could possibly get me in trouble, and I would never trust it with the police. I would never trust police with information that could potentially harm me ever. And they want you to so bad. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, yeah, you can trust us. It's cool. Like, look at this shit. Like, it doesn't happen. So, again, I'll get off my soapbox. Oh my God. We're only on page 19 and I'm fucking an hour and a half in. That's insane. Okay. Wow. I feel like it didn't take me this long. I guess I just have a lot to say. So okay. Also, Mester's ex-girlfriend, this Taylor chick, she said that, oh yeah, she told law enforcement that Brad Holder and Johnny Messer were two of the most violent people she knew and were fully capable of having been involved in the murders, which I totally believe that. I kind of just said that. Like, I feel like they were kind of like more of the leaders. And they said this, I think, is bullshit. They said Johnny Messer's ex-girlfriend stated that a motive for their involvement in the murder of Abby and Libby might be the concept of blood in and blood out, which means social acceptance in their secret circles. And like there's like rumors like, that there's like gang initiations. You have to like murder someone in order to be initiated in the gang, or you need to like do something that like specifically like gives whatever. So, but yeah, that might be true. Like, I guess that could be true. Like, if they just needed the ritual, like blood or something of like, a virgin or whatever. I don't know what they needed out of like Libby and Abby, but obviously something. And I would think that it's like, I think you're supposed to like actually be involved in the ritual. So I don't feel like it's like blooded, blood out, blooded. Like, I don't think it was an initiation thing. I think it was like more of like, we want to become like Ubermenches. Like, we want to become the Overmen. Like, we want to surpass and get to the next level of man. And by doing that, we have to engage in some of these rituals and, give sacrifices. And like, I do connect with like a lot of, I do think that like with the advancement of like society and like science and stuff, that a lot of these really old traditions that go back just, basically since the beginning of humans, like starting to gather, like I don't think give enough credit to all kind of those theories. Everyone's like, oh, you're so woo-woo-y. Like when people are like, oh yeah, things get weird when it's a full moon, and people are like, oh, that's not true. And it's like, well, I don't know, like, why are we so quick it's all energy, and like there is different pulls from all the different planets on energy. Like, why wouldn't we think that it influences things that happen in this world? You know what I mean? And like, also, no, I'll stop there, I guess. So, yeah, so police secured the phone and listened to 3 phone calls involving just Johnny Messer. And in 2 of the phone calls, Messer was offering money to other people to find someone so they can be injured or killed. And then a 3rd call involved bragging about holding a subject hostage and shooting them at his house. Which this sounds like the dude that I worked with during the long-term therapy, when he would like brag to me about all of these things. Like, oh yeah, and then like, I watched this guy get exploded in his guts with a bomb when we were like at this chop shop, or whatever. And I like do question like whether or not some of it's real. You know what I mean? But it might be. So any hoozles. I mean, definitely there are some really badass people out there. You know what I mean? Like, not like badasses, like, like scary, scary motherfuckers. So anyways, this unified command said nothing to see here for Johnny Messer. and issued no search warrants to like be able to say that. And this is like another little like snarky comment of the defense. They go, nor did they attempt to utilize an age-old investigative tool referred to as interrogation to pursue the truth about the involvement of Johnny Messer, Brad Holder, or Patrick Westfall in these crimes, which I appreciate the little flair. Says many more shocking facts concerning the so-called investigation will be revealed in the body of the memorandum. And then it says, evidence shows that during his pre-trial incarceration at Westville Correctional Facility, Richard Allen has been monitored, intimidated, and mentally abused by correctional officers who are also members of the Odinism cult. And this, to me, it makes me feel sick to my stomach because honestly, it's like, I bet it's fucking true. And it's just pretty crazy what happens behind these prison walls and like how many people are willing to like cover it up and how many people are affiliated with like, you know, white supremacy, like anti-black basically. So anyways, the two people that they allege, the two actual officers or correctional officers are Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones. And this is pretty fucking crazy, I think. That the Westville Corrections officers boldly wore patches on their DOC uniforms, the Department of Corrections uniforms, that proclaimed "In Odin we trust," along with another patch displaying symbols of Odinism, like interlocking triangles. So this is something else that I will say, and this is definitely a stretch, but I'm still going to put it out there. Something in my research with the Idaho 4 case that I found a lot was, again, like these kind of like throwbacks to like, you know, Greek mythology, and more of like these very old concepts of like pagan gods. And something that I saw come up was these knots, like, you know, Celtic knots, and like different designs. And then somehow I like found a connection to like knot theory in terms of genetic research, that's a whole other path that I want to go down someday because it's definitely another theme that keeps coming up in my research of these cases. But I won't do that necessarily today. But I did find another strange connection with knot theory in terms of genetics, which are significant in the Idaho 4 case. So it's just interesting that they'll show it later, the interlocking triangles. It reminds me of the same kind of knot that I'm talking about, both, you know, genetically, like, or like, you know, what's the word? Not genetically. Well, yeah, I guess like it would be DNA, like in DNA, the knot theory, and like how different strains of like DNA can like attach and reattach and like kind of like become really, really like intricately knotted. And that's like, you know, kind of how you change certain DNAs. And I won't even go down that rabbit hole because I don't feel like I'm like smart enough right now to talk about it, but it is like how it is associated with vaccines too, and like how vaccines are made and how that DNA can change. So yeah, but these interlocking triangles remind me of that too. And then it says both these officers also displayed images of runes and other Odinite symbols on their Facebook pages, which I know they go into detail later, that they have like altars and stuff, which is like kind of weird. Like it sounds like creepy altars, like where they have like fur and like just exactly what you would imagine an Odin altar would look like. Do you know what I mean? So, oh yeah, here it says. Sergeant Robinson, June 25th, 2023, displayed a photograph of his Odinite altar on his Facebook page. And a similar one can be found on the Facebook page of Brad Holder. And then they also were wearing patches beginning at least on April 3rd. So what they take a really long time to explain this in here, but basically what they're saying is that once they started finding out that there was like this Odinite kind of tilt for things, like the defense, once they became aware of it, they started kind of paying attention to their visitations with Richard Allen, and they noticed that these guards had patches on their uniforms. And then they said after August 17th, they stopped wearing them. Like the same officers were there, but the patches weren't on their uniforms anymore. And the thing that had changed was that something, I can't remember, it'll go into detail later in here and I'll talk about it, but it basically, these guys got a heads up. Like someone found out that they were onto them with the Odinite shit, and then they took off the things. It was like, it was like a disposition with, I can't remember with who, but in the disposition, a lot of the Odinite shit came up, and these guys must have gotten a heads up from someone that was like, on the ins about that. And then, yeah, so, and then it wasn't until August 10th, 2023, deposition of Trooper Jerry Holman that this is what I was just talking about, that Richard Allen's defense team finally revealed to the prosecutor and the Unified Command that for many months, they had been fully aware of the strong evidence linking Odinism to the murders. Yeah. So it's like basically just, they're like, we can't believe it. This is so bad. Yeah, this is them being like, and then curiously, or perhaps not so curiously, in those 7 days since the defense team revealed their knowledge that evidence linked Odinites to the murders, for the first time, Sergeant Robinson was no longer wearing his Odin patch. And it was almost as if someone had alerted Odinite Robinson that the gig was up, because the lawyers knew about the links to Odinism. So lose the patch and pray that the defense attorneys had never noticed the patches on prior visits. Unfortunately for West Lawn Unified Command, Rick's defense team absolutely noticed the patches. And yeah, anyways, it's just conspicuous. Wait, no, am I saying that right? Conspicuous? Okay, no, I'm just sounding dumb. Okay, moving on. So it said the court's also going to be presented information that these two officers were always with Richard Allen whenever he was talking with his attorneys or his wife, and that they videotaped him, and like they were always within earshot. And I'm like, dude, that's shady as fuck. Like, I don't think that, I mean, that's not legal, at least not in Minnesota. Like, I know for a fact that, like, offenders 100% are allowed private discussions with their lawyers, period. Like, it's insane to me that someone was recorded on a handheld camera. Like, that seems crazy. So, yeah, here it says they even videotaped. That's nuts. And he never, like, Richard Allen never said anything, because obviously these two officers, or one of the two, is always by his side whenever he's meeting with anyone. And the only questions he asked was, is my wife alive? Is my family alive? Is my wife safe? Is my family safe? So basically what they're alleging is that Richard Allen was definitely too scared to say anything in front of these offenders to any of these people. So they also say that they kind of kept it from, they call him Richard Allen, the guy who was arrested. They didn't tell him about this Odinite angle because they thought it would put him in more at risk, like being in the prison. So, which I don't know, like, kind of like, that could be true or not. I'm not exactly sure. Yeah, that's just explaining why they didn't tell him. Okay, so also I'm starting to like look at the time, and I'm like, I wish I could just keep going on a little bit longer, but I might have to get going. I didn't know how this was going to go, but I really did not think it was going to take me, almost 2 hours to go through 23 pages. That's kind of embarrassing, but whatever. Yeah, but I think I am gonna schedule like another. I'll do another live. If anyone who is currently watching has any suggestions on like when a good time for the live might be to follow up with the rest of this, or if you guys have any questions or comments or thoughts or concerns or whatever, please comment, or like comment later after the video is posted or whatever. But yeah, so then I think I will plan on probably going live again. I'm gonna schedule it for, I'll do tomorrow. And if things get crazy tonight, maybe I'll come on tonight and try to finish it up. Or I guess if things don't get crazy tonight with me, I will come on tonight. But I'm leaning more towards tomorrow if I come on tonight. So I will schedule a live for tomorrow at 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And plan on finishing this up. So, but let's see where I'm at right now. Yeah, no, I think this might be. I'm also gonna look into the murder of Detective Forensi. I'm super interested in that. Oh, hmm. Yeah, it is kind of sad that Rick had to stay, in this correctional facility with these people that are like, known to be Odinites. Oh, thanks so much, Chuck. I appreciate it. That's cool. Um, yeah, all right, cool. Well, hopefully it'll continue to be that way and other people agree. But yeah, I think I'll stop here. Page 23, Michael Jordan. Woot woot. And yeah, thanks everyone for being here. I appreciate you guys so much. And thanks for anyone who's watching later. And hopefully I will see you guys all in my next live. I appreciate you guys and peace and love.